Hey there, welcome to the little plastic unheated greenhouse. So I wanted to just chat with you today about a few questions that people have had about this greenhouse. I've grown in it for a few seasons now. I really like growing in it, and every year I get a lot of different questions just about how to grow in it and different things. And so I thought I would just sit down, answer some of those questions. I do also have some other videos about the greenhouse, so there's a whole playlist about that. But yeah, I thought I got a few questions, thought I'd just answer them and just give you a little look. Now, the greenhouse is empty right now because if you've been following along, you know that we are actually moving. And so the garden is moving and the greenhouse is moving as well. This is one thing that I will definitely be taking with me because it's just such a nice little tool to have for gardening, I guess. And so let me sit down. I'm going to pull out the questions. I wrote them all down and I'll just answer. I'll just go through some of your questions about the greenhouse. There it is from afar. So we got our first killing frost last night, like really deep cold freeze. And this is where having one of these little greenhouses is super helpful. It's really nice if you have a cold climate that you live in. Put my chair down. It's really nice in a cold climate to be able to offer your plants some protection, and that is where something like this can come in really handy. Now, I suppose you could actually go as far as to figure out some kind of heating device for a greenhouse like that. I personally never have actually invested in a heater of any kind. So it's always been an unheated greenhouse situation. So it's a little bit different growing in it than obviously growing in a heated greenhouse. So you're not going to be doing something like growing tomatoes throughout the winter or keeping your citrus plants going or anything like that. But what I have found works so well in these greenhouses is to use them, one, to overwinter plants. So last year I started a bunch of perennials from seed, like black-eyed Susans, echinacea, those kind of things, foxglove from seed. Started them in about July. And then I just actually put them in the greenhouse over the winter. And I felt like, they were perennials for my climate. So they could get down to my zone. And they could have been fine probably outside, but because they were small, they were in plug trays and everything, I put them in the unheated greenhouse to winter them over, and it worked super well. I think, obviously I didn't do a full compare or contrast, so I don't know how many would have maybe died if they'd been outside throughout the whole cold winter, but I didn't deal with hardly any loss of those little seedlings. They were still pretty small. Over the winter, they did really well being overwintered in that greenhouse, and it was a really great way to utilize it. The other way that I like to utilize these greenhouses is for starting perennials and cold hardy crops. So I have started things like green onions, lettuces, spinach, kales. I have started milkweed and peas, other perennials. I have started those kind of things that can handle a little bit of cold temperatures in the unheated greenhouse, and it just gives them a little bit more protection and a little bit more heat, and so they've done so well in the greenhouse. I started a bunch of stuff, milkweed, those different cold weather crops in the greenhouse in about February last year, and they did great. It was a really wonderful way to grow in it. So I just wanted to kind of briefly go through what I like to grow in it and how I like to use it. That's basically like the really short version of what I like to start in it. Cold weather crops, overwintering, starting perennials, overwintering perennials. It's great for that. Because let me talk through the temperatures a little bit. So these greenhouses really, the temperature in them really depends on if you have it open or closed and if you have sun or cloudy days and shade. So if it's open, it's going to be whatever temperature basically it is outside, it might warm up a little bit, especially if you have a really, really hot day. So if you have like a day in the 70s, it might get into 80 or 90 degrees Fahrenheit in there, even with the door open. If you keep the door closed, you can trap a good amount of heat, and it'll really heat up during the day. If this thing is in the sun and you don't have a cloudy day, it will heat up to well over, I don't know, 80, 90 degrees, even in the winter, even when it's like 30 degrees Fahrenheit outside, and it will hold a lot of that heat overnight, and you'll probably be able to keep it from freezing in the greenhouse. Now, the reason that I don't keep, you know, those frost tender things going all through the winter and everything is because if you have a cloudy day, the greenhouse won't heat up like that, and then it'll just get down to whatever cold temperature it is outside. So if you have like a long string of cloudy, snowy days, it's probably gonna get pretty cold in here. Now, a couple people did ask me about my location, like why do I have it up near the house here? What is the reason for that? Does it provide protection? And yes, the answer is there is a reason for it. One, it's a very full sun area. So again, the sun is going to really heat this greenhouse up. It is protected, it's close to the house. So there is some warmth that comes from the rocks, both on the ground and being near the house, being in that sheltered area. I think that does help to keep it warmer as well. And then the third really big reason is that it is protected from wind. And I think probably the number one issue that I hear people having with these greenhouses is that they've blown over. So if you can secure it, like mine is tied to the fence and it's in a protected corner, and I have it weighted down, well, not right now because it's empty, but when it's growing, I have it weighted down with 15-gallon grow bags full of soil so that it's not going to blow anywhere. And I've never had an issue with it blowing over. I've never had any kind of problem with things even shaking when we've had windy days, never had an issue. But keeping it protected like this out of the wind and in full sun is what I have found allows for the very best growing conditions in this kind of a greenhouse. So the location is definitely important and will really help with your heat retention. If you had it in a shady area and nothing to tie it to, you have a much harder time both keeping it warm and keeping it from blowing over or falling over. Now, it does have the shelves in there, which are really nice. Someone asked if they come with the shelves. Some do and some don't. Most of the greenhouses come with these shelves, and there's a variety of different sizes that you can get. So there's like one that's about twice the size of this. There's just one that has like 3 shelves. This is about, I think it's about 2 by 4 ish, maybe a little bit bigger than like a 2 by 4 space. It did come with 4 shelves, which were nice. I do like to take zip ties and zip tie the little metal grate of the shelf onto the actual structure just to give it a little bit more security, because again, it's, you know, it's not the sturdiest structure. So I just like to do those things that I can, like just zip tying the shelves on. Although I have had this now for 3 years, I have a couple tiny rips like at the base of the cover where I like pulled it a little too hard, and I did step on one of the poles and that broke, but otherwise it's actually held up decently well. So if you were worried about the strength of the structure, it's actually held up, I think, pretty well, considering it was like a $60 little greenhouse. Now, I have been asked how the light penetrates through this greenhouse cover. I have not had any real issue. I think all my plants have grown pretty well. Obviously, I've done a lot of growing in it in the winter, spring months when we don't have quite as long days of sunlight anyways, but I've never had an issue. Everything seems to grow pretty well. I have heard, and I don't have personal experience because this is the only one that I've ever had, but I've heard that the ones that have like the green covers like this, that the cover holds up a little bit better than some of like the white ones. So I don't know if that's, as again, I don't have personal experience with that, but that is what I have heard. And I will say that this cover has lasted me 3 seasons now. And other than a couple little rips where I like kind of yanked on it, which I probably should have just been a little bit more gentle with it, it's held up really well. So that is good. And let me see what else. Oh, it is not like animal proof. I have had people ask me, like, does it keep squirrels out? Because they know that I deal with such crazy squirrel issues in this garden. It does not. The squirrels and everything get in there. So any kind of like pest prevention that you want to do, you want to just make sure you're doing whatever, like if you're doing chicken wire over things and stuff, you want to do that in there as well, because the pests will get in it. And the other thing that you want to be a little careful of too, as far as pests, is any kind of overwintering or potting soil that you're using in there. If you are overwintering plants in the greenhouse, again, it's staying a little bit warmer than it would outside. And it's offering a bit more protection, which means that it's also offering protection for some of those little insects and different bugs that get into the soil. So do keep an eye. If you have anything that has any kind of infestation going on in there, make sure that you are taking those plants out. Try not to let anything get kind of like settled in there, because it is just that much warmer. It stays about 10 degrees warmer inside than outdoors if you've got it closed up, and so it just offers a little bit more protection for those bugs and insects, and they can kind of get in there and yeah, take hold. So I would be careful of that. But otherwise, it's super good. I do have still in here, you can see my container pond, and I have been using that as a little bit of a heat source, and that worked so well last winter. So that big container of water helps to absorb some of the heat from the sun during the day and radiate it back out overnight. So while it's not officially heated, that is a really cool option and something that you should definitely play with if you have one of these greenhouses, because you can provide a little bit of warmth with something like that. Of course, you need to be careful if you have open water in your space for kids and pets and animals and things. You just want to be careful with open water, but it has helped me a lot to keep my greenhouse warm. I just love this thing. So we're going to be moving. We're actually moving to California, so it's going to be probably warmer there than it is here. So it may change a little bit how I use it, but I probably will use it for seed starting. And just depending on what the frost is looking like where we are, I'm not quite sure yet. I will probably start a bunch of tomatoes and things out there if we don't have a frost, because why not? Now, even if you're in a frost-free area, or even if you're seed starting in this greenhouse, which is a great thing to seed start, like let's say maybe you are in a frost area, so you're like me, you're going to be starting your frost hardy perennials and your cold hardy crops and things like in March, April, February, March, April. Just remember, you don't, unless you put grow lights in the greenhouse, even though it's outside, the light is not going to be as long because the days aren't as long. So that's something I didn't think about at first, realizing like, yeah, things aren't going to grow as fast as they would under grow lights. One, because maybe it's not quite as warm or it's getting cool at night, so that's slowing things down, but also mostly the sunlight. So when we have our things inside, we're seed starting, like let's say you're going to seed start broccoli in February inside, you're going to have it have under grow lights. You're probably going to have those grow lights on for, 14 hours a day or something like that. When you are starting those kind of things out here, outdoors, even if it's warm enough for the plant to start growing, maybe it's only getting 10 hours of daylight or whatever it's outside sun is doing. So that's something to remember too, because that will slow down your seed starting. So just account for that. Like when I started my green onions out here, I just knew they were going to grow a little bit slower, and they still grew and they still did beautifully, and it was totally fine. They just grew a little bit slower, and I just was prepared for that because I knew that that was what happened with the sunlight in the greenhouse. I'm trying to think if there's any other common questions I get asked. A lot of people just want to know if it holds up, and as I said, it's lasted 3 seasons, so we've done pretty well with it. If you have any other questions, you can put them in the comments. I'll try to get to the comments. Sometimes I have a little bit of a hard time getting to all the comments because my life just gets kind of crazy, but I will try my best. And as you can see, we're in the midst of packing up the garden. I am going to take you guys with me through my whole moving garden, renting garden, moving forever garden experiences over the next year or so. It's going to be a pretty exciting, pretty fun year. But hopefully, if you are planning out your winter, spring growing and you're thinking about one of these greenhouses, hopefully this helped you a little bit make some decisions or some plans for that. It is the perfect thing for like this corner is just kind of a, I don't know, not an easily used corner of my garden, and it works perfectly for a space like that. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.